Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 26th lecture of this course. I wish you are enjoying these lectures and there is not much problem in comprehending these lectures. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the principles of sampling. What are those principles on which the sampling has to be proceeded or developed? The main principle behind sampling is that we seek knowledge about the total units, that is population, by observing a few units called sample and extend our inference about the sample to the entire population. So suppose if we are going to purchase a bag of wheat, we can take out a small sample from the middle of the bag with a cutter. It gives us an inference whether the wheat in the bag is good or not. But it is not necessary that a study of sample will always give us 100% correct picture of the total population. If few people in the village are found in favor of family planning, we should not conclude that all the people in the village would necessarily have the same opinion. The opinion may vary in terms of religion, educational level, age, economic status, and such others. Similarly, if we are going to study, say, the level of satisfaction from teaching, level of the satisfaction among students from teaching at any department, then inquiring some students is not a proper research. Or we may have some idea from asking the questions to some of the students, but not all the students are going to give the same reply. Even if all of them are satisfied with the teaching, they may be satisfied at different levels of satisfaction, and even if they are dissatisfied, they may be dissatisfied at different levels of dissatisfaction. So the opinion varies. Or if suppose we are studying the performance of commercial banks, commercial banks, then also there may be different opinions or different performances. Or if we are studying the performance of private commercial banks, then also just by asking, there could be various performance, positive, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, negative of the banks, private banks. Or if we are going to study the opinion of the people about the government schools anywhere, then also the opinion would be varying. So one has to be very particular about this. The researcher is in a very tight situation, because if the sampling is not done properly to reflect the true characteristics and all the characteristics of the population, then naturally the inference that is going to be drawn is not going to reflect the true generalization, the true position of the population. the generalization of the findings of the sample to for the whole of the population is called inference. We infer or draw the inference. The researcher infers the findings of, the conclusion of the sample for the whole of the population, and these findings of the sample is generalized for the total population. So, it is a very tricky thing. If there is wrong inference, then the whole all exercise has gone in vain. The expenditure that is involved here and the human resource which is involved here, the finance which is involved here is all wasted. This is why the inference, the job of inference is not an easy task, and this goes from the sample, because if the sample technique is appropriate and the sample that has been developed is representative of all the characteristics or most of the characteristics of the population, then we must be very sure that what generalization we make for all the population would be appropriate. However, if it is not, then the generalization would become inappropriate, the results would become difficult to be implemented, and as I said, the whole exercise is wasted. So, the study of the sample becomes necessary because a study of very large population would require a long period of time, a large number of interviewers, a large amount of money, and doubtful accuracy about the data collected by numerous investigators. So, these are the problems which come in the census survey, and this is why the survey has to be done. So, the planning of the observation of study with a sample is more manageable than with the population. Rather, in most of the researches, we find that as the population is large, there is no alternative but to make the sample study, go for a sample study. Important principles of sampling. The social scientists or the scientists who are expert in this, what they say? For them, the sample units must be systematic and objective. That is, the sampling units which have been chosen, the sampling that has been made should be systematic in a systematic and objective manner. And this is where we have to mention that even if the researcher has decided to go for a sampling technique which is non-random, a kind of judgment sampling, then if it is so, then also the researcher has to follow logic. The choice of the sample has to be in logical consonance of the study. Of course, because there are many studies in which one has no option. The researcher cannot do anything except that the researcher has to go for a non-random sampling method. Then also in that he has to make a logical choice. Although it has not been totally left to the chance, the researcher has acquired the power to select the items or members of the population, but then the researcher must go with a logical explanation in choosing of the members of the sample. So, for example, if the researcher is working on the Indian migrants who come back and who they want to study the problem of settlement, their problem of settlement, their problem of integration in the society, in the economy, when they come back, how they get integrated in society, how they get integrated in economy once they have come back after staying in those countries for 7 decades, 2 decades or 3 decades, how do they adjust in the economy and society here, if we have to study this. So, sometimes we may not have opportunity to go for a purely random sample, but then the researcher has to logically go for the choice of the respondents or making the sample for the study. There are logical methods. We can choose the region, district by say concentration. Suppose there are 80 districts in Uttar Pradesh. So, the researcher cannot say select the districts for a study in a random manner. Why? Because if in random selection any district in which any district has equal chance of being included in the sample, so even some districts which have a very low outflow of migrant workers to the GCC countries may be selected, and that may not be of so use for the researcher. So, what the researcher defines? So, researcher selects in the sample, in his or her sample, the districts which are highly concentrated, which have high density or high proportion of the workers going to the Gulf countries. So, what does he do? He says that okay, I will select for my study 5 districts who have the largest concentration of the workers in the Gulf countries, and district A, B, C, D, E, they are selected on the basis of the largest sender of expatriate workers to the GCC countries. So that is how here the choice of sample has taken place on non-random basis. So we find that although the selection of the sample has been on the non-random basis, but despite that the researcher did not go according to his or her whims, but rather he devised a formula, he devised a logic that all those 5 districts which are having the largest concentration or who are largest sender of the Indian workers to the Gulf countries, they would be selected in our sample for a study of the Indian migrant, the returnees who has come back from after decades of working in the Gulf countries. So as we observed here that the choice of the sample was not very random, but then despite that there was a logic followed in the selection of the districts to be studied. This makes the difference that in any case the sample units that have been chosen must be done in the systematic and objective manner. Of course, in the random selection these things come, but in the non-random also it should be done in the logical way which has the support of the which is supported by the logic. Then the sample units must be clearly defined and easily identifiable. The sample units are not identified and defined clearly, and then these are not easily identifiable, then of course this sample has to be this sample is not going to work so smoothly and would not give us result as pure result as we want. Similarly, the sample units must be independent of each other. The members who have been selected in the sample, it is to be ensured that in this they give their own opinion. They are not influenced by other members of the sample. If it is the student satisfaction level, all students who have been selected in the sampling unit must give their opinion independent of others' opinion. The opinion may be same or may be different, but here what is meant by this, that there should be no influence of the sampling units. That is, a student should not influence the other student. A respondent should not influence the other respondent. They cannot do this. If it is done, then again the results that we are going to get are not going to reflect the true position of the problem that we are studying or that we were studying. And this is why this is also important, that the sampling units, they are completely different from each other and rather different in opinion, not they can be different in being not being influenced rather, that they are not influenced, independent of influence from the other sampling units. As I stated, their opinion may be similar and the opinions may be different, but in any case, the one sampling unit should not be able to influence the other sampling unit. One student should not be able to influence the other students either positively or negatively, either to respond or give response in this way or that way. It should be, every sampling unit must be have complete freedom of giving their opinion which truly they have in their heart. So, this is why the sampling units must be independent of each other. Further, the same units of sample should be used throughout the study. If we are studying, it's not that at one stage we are using one sample, in another stage we are using another sample, in the next stage we are using say third sample. That will not be do. In the whole of the research process, the sample unit which has been selected from the sample design that we adopted will be used throughout the study. We cannot change the sample in between. Or suppose we got a result from the sample. We did not want it somehow, although we could not influence it also. So, this does not mean that if we did not have what we wish to have, the results, so we change the sample and then give the study. No. Once a sample is selected at each stage of the study, this sample will only used. There is no change of the sample, or in the sample we cannot bring in some and push out some others at the stages of the collection of the data. The sample we had made, that will be sacrosanct, and we cannot either pull some members or some items of the sample out or push some members in this sample, because then the sample will not remain the same sample which we had envisaged, which we had developed in the very beginning while developing the sample, the sample or for doing the sample survey. So, the originality of the sample has to be maintained very vigorously. Further, the selection process should be based on some sound criteria and should avoid errors, bias and distortion. So, bias and distortion is something which not only spoils the sample but which in fact spoils the whole study. And this is what we have been discussing, that if there is random sampling or there is, even if there is non-random sampling, there has to be some criteria and some logic for including the sampling units in the sample, members or items in the sample. They have to be brought in or out, no, because there has to be, how the sample is to be made is very clear in the sampling techniques when we go for a study, and it cannot be changed according to the wishes of the researcher, because if it is done then it will reflect badly on the sample itself, in the data collected from the sample, and of course the results of the sample, and then the generalization or inference of the results. We also discuss certain advantages of the sampling. It is not possible to study a large number of people or a large number of anything scattered in a wide geographical area. Sampling will reduce their number. As I gave the example of commercial banks, if we have to study the performance of commercial banks in India, then the bank is scattered all over the country, all over the states of India, all over the districts of India, and small, even in a smaller cities in India. So it is a large spread and scattered all over a wide geographical area. So what will happen? We cannot study it as a census survey. When we go for sampling, this reduces their number. If suppose we are working on the Indian migrant workers who has returned back, their adjustment in the society, their adjustment in the economy, if we are going to work that, then the migrants, Indian workers have been going to those countries from each and every part of the country. So if we go on collecting the data as a census survey from all over the country, then maybe we are unable to in fact complete our project in our lifetime. So this is why we have to go for a sampling, because it will reduce the number, their number. If we are going to study the public opinion about government schools in Delhi, then of course there may be thousands of those schools. So how can we go for all those schools and seek opinion of all the parents? There are lakhs of students. It is almost impossible. So the sampling will reduce number. We will select some schools. We would select, of course, we would select some districts. We are going to select some schools in such districts, and of course we are going to select some parents to ask about their perception about the performance of government schools in Delhi. So we are in this way the size of the population to be studied reduces when we take the sample, and it is practical. Otherwise If it is not done, then we shall be unable to complete this project. The advantages of sampling are that it saves time and money. We can have idea of the whole population within, say, 1 year of this study, within 1 year, or say within 2 years. So, and limited money also. Money is always limited. It cannot be unlimited. Time is also there, and it is also not unlimited. So, this is why we go for a sampling. Further, it saves the distraction of units. As we have experienced and discussed that there are some units of the population, when they are studied, they shall be distracted. So, in that case, we cannot go for a census. So, if we are cooking the rice, we just check 3 or 4 rice and then find the conclusion about these rices, and then infer or generalize the findings of these 3-4 rice for the whole of the rice in the pot. So, if we go on checking each rice, then all rice will be distracted. There is another very good example of the blood tests which we are getting done frequently if we have any disease. So, those who come for, say, testing the malaria or dengue or any fever or any kind of diseases, then what they do? They take a small size of the blood. If all the blood is taken out for studying, then the patient, maybe he is not left to live in this world. So, the 1 milliliter or very small in a syringe, small portion in the syringe is taken for the test, for the blood test. And of course, the blood which has been taken is distracted. It cannot be again supplied into the body, it is distracted. So, in those cases where in the testing of the or in checking the population, the sampling unit is wasted or distracted, sampling is the only course to be adopted. So again, it increases accuracy of the data, because if there are a small number of subjects to a study, a small number of students to a study, a small number of the banks to a study, a small number of parents of school children to study, then it increases control over the size which we are dealing with. It is under our control. But if it is very large, then it is not our control. And if the things are in our control, as much we are in control, it as much increases the accuracy of the data. And further, it achieves greater response rate. The response rate is also very important, because if we choose the whole population to study, there would be, we cannot pursue all of them to respond, because we cannot reach all of them. There are millions of people, there are lakhs of parents, and there are lakhs of students. So how can we in fact force them to respond to our inquiry? So as much greater the population, as much greater is the non-response, and it is natural. So this is why sample is very important here. And what is that? If in the sample, since the population becomes a small part of it, there are less number of students to be done the inquiry. There are less number of parents who are to be studied in the inquiry. There are less number of banks who have to be studied in the inquiry. So what is going to happen? We have more chances of approaching the members of the sample, the constituents of the sample, units of the sample, and then it means that we may achieve the greater response rate through the respondents. Further, it achieves greater cooperation from the respondents, and it is also easy to supervise a few interviewers in the sample, but difficult to supervise a very large number of interviewers in the study of the total population that we have discussed. And further, the researcher can keep a low profile also. So these are the advantages of the sample, and this is why the sample survey is a very popular method of studying the problem of any research. And with this I conclude, and I hope I have been able to discuss with you in a fruitful way the principles and advantages of sampling, and I have been able to make it clear to you in a very good way. Thank you very much.